I woke up with him sitting at the corner of my bed, and he said it looked like a bomb went off in my shoulder and that I may not get full use back.
Welcome to Fem MD, real talk for women who are balancing careers, ambition, and the chaos that comes with it all. Today we're chatting with Dr. Stephanie Pearson. She's a board-certified OB-GYN that practiced for many years and then sustained a career-ending injury at work. Her story is terrifying, honestly. As a surgeon, I recognize almost on a daily basis that my career and livelihood is dependent upon my brain and my body. When you don't have one of those, you're not able to practice. When she lost the ability to operate, she was terminated by her employer. We're going to talk about the details of that. And then she eventually shifted her entire career and is now a co-founder of a disability insurance company that provides coverage to physicians. Let's welcome Dr. Stephanie Pearson. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today. The very first time we met was at a Hippocratic Collective event in Philly. You told me your story, and I want you to share it today. I think that a lot of surgeons in particular have this fear about getting hurt. What's crazy about your injury is that it happened at work.
Yes.
I do want to talk about your current work today with PearsonRavitz, but I want to start from the beginning, and I want you to walk us through this career-altering event that happened to you.
Yeah. So I am an OB-GYN by training and trained and worked in Philadelphia. And I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I went down to do a precipitous delivery. Actually, one of my favorite patients, I delivered other of her children. This one should have just fallen out, but because she got there too late to get anesthesia, it became a little more complicated, and she was a lot bigger than I am. And during the delivery, I got kicked twice in the shoulder, and I know she didn't mean to, it wasn't malicious, but I ended up with a torn labrum in my left shoulder. My first orthopedist was not so kind, and really blew off my symptoms, and I ended up developing a frozen shoulder. I then had surgery with a new surgeon, and he said, "Don't worry, we'll operate, we'll have you back to work in 12 weeks." And that was actually almost 12 and a half years ago. I woke up with him sitting at the corner of my bed, and he said it looked like a bomb went off in my shoulder and that I may not get full use back. And he was not wrong. I have considerable range of motion deficits and nerve damage in my left arm. I was never cleared to do OB or operate. And quite honestly, I was cleared to do office GYN as tolerated, but I never got the opportunity because in my contract, it said I needed to be able to do 100% of my job duties. And so I was terminated the day that my FMLA was up. And so I had just turned 40, and we had just bought a new house and moved. And here I was, lost my career, lost my identity. I had no idea how much being Dr. Pearson meant to my being. And I learned a lot the hard way, oddly enough, about insurance.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so much to unpack there. How did you end up with your first orthopedist? So, day of injury,
I
kind
had
of
to stay
kind of go.
within the system
Okay.
because it was work related. I had to stay in our system and go to who they wanted me to go to. And not for nothing, we used to be friends. And I wonder if that had something to do actually with how he treated me. Um, but it wasn't great.
In what way? How do you think that you guys being friends altered the care?
I think there was an expectation, without being egotistical, I guess I am tough, right? Like, I used to do martial arts, I rock climbed, and I think it was one of those, "You're gonna be fine, you're tough," type of thing. Whereas when I was saying what was happening, he basically told me that professional baseball pitchers pitched with torn labrums, so I should be able to do my job.
Hmm. Okay. I don't love that. Gosh. Do you ever think back to like how it would be different if you didn't start with him as your provider post
Oh,
injury?
I have thought of it many times, but that doesn't
Help
do my
anything.
mental space, any favors. So, back in the beginning, I thought about it a lot. As time's gone on, it is what it is, and it was so long ago now that holding any resentment doesn't do anything for me.
How long were you on FMLA?
I took that's a great I guess what's FMLA 12 weeks or 16 weeks? I actually don't remember. But whatever the FMLA was what I took off. And the whole point of FMLA is that it's supposed to protect your job, but
Mhm.
because the disability was involved and my second orthopedist actually put that I was a liability in his records, and so malpractice insurers wouldn't cover me.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. Did he talk about that? Like he said you were a liability in the notes. And I remember us
Yep.
talking about this at dinner. Did he know that that verbiage in his like medical record would have the impact on your career that it did?
I have no idea, and I never really asked him about it. My assumption has always been that there was a precedented case in Philadelphia County where an orthopedist got on the hook for a surgeon who they cleared to go back to work, and that surgeon had a complication, and the plaintiff sued the orthopedist who cleared the surgeon.
Oh my
So
God.
that's kind of what I've always assumed was he was protecting himself.
Defensive
And
medicine.
right. And I think honestly, having the time and I guess wisdom 12 years later, he probably did me a favor, especially because OB-GYN is so litigious. And if, you do enough pelvic exams, you're going to miss an ovary, right? Ovarian cancer still plagues GYNs that you're going to miss something. And if I missed something, I wouldn't be defensible. And so maybe it's sour grapes, I don't know, but I think he might have done me a favor and not gotten me into a position that would potentially become litigious.
This is an interesting topic because I think as a surgeon, I have told myself that like I will have suit brought against me at some point in my career. I don't know when, I don't know who, but it's all about the defensibility aspect.
Yeah.
Had you, this might be a personal question, but had you
Okay.
had anything brought against you before all of this happened?
Yes, I had been deposed. It's not fun.
No.
I mean, every OB is at some point, to your point, it's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yeah.
But
And you,
I've always been defensible because I didn't make a mistake. But you know what I mean, like,
yeah.
you're unfortunately, in medicine, you're guilty until you're proven innocent as far as I'm concerned, but, you know.
So then how did they tell you you lost your job?
My mailman, knocked on my door and handed me the letter. Nobody had the decency to call me and give me a heads up from my practice. They My 2 senior partners swore that they didn't know, but I still find that hard to believe.
How big of a group were you in at that point?
5 of us,
So to
but we
lose
were owned.
full-time, I mean, you would think that the partners would know that they were gonna be losing a full-time
y
person.
You would think, but again, you have to pick your battles and, being mad at certain people does not do you any good.
Oh, for sure. So you open the piece of mail. I can imagine you're standing there in your foyer, like,
Yeah.
what the hell? Your sweat is dripping down your back.
Oh, yeah.
Did you anticipate any of this happening?
Oh god, no, it came out of left field. I had been asked to be the chairperson of our department before I got hurt. I was
Oh,
one of their highest producing OB-GYNs. I was super busy. I It came out of nowhere.
you were about to say that you guys were. Tell us the structure of your guys' setup. Like, who actually made that decision? Who had the power to let you go at that point?
So we were a 5 doc practice, but we were owned by the hospital system. So it was the chairman of the department and the hospital system that was able to let me go. But to their credit, or to their point, my contract said I needed to be able to do 100% of my job duties. And quite honestly, I don't think I looked at my contract since the day I signed it, 10 years prior to that. So, I would urge your listeners, make sure someone's looking at your contract for you and know, where there are potential hiccups.
I mean, from a humanistic perspective, you would have thought that they would have come to you and been like, Stephanie, here's the deal. We've got
Yeah.
this shoulder problem. Um, you could still practice medically as a GYN, or we could come up with some type of like extended leave until all this gets figured out. I mean,
I,
why do you think that it was such a harsh, like black and white decision
I
on their end?
honestly, I think it's legal. I think it's defensive medicine. I mean, I had spoken to the program director like 3 days prior, and I remember specifically him saying, take your time. We want you back when you're 100%. And I said, I don't know if I'm ever going to be 100%, but I was cleared to, blah, 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 blah. And then I got the letter 3 days later. So I think he knew what he was doing all along and could have just said it on the phone. But
Mhm.
I'm 99.9% sure it had to do with legalities.
Okay, so then another personal question. Financially, at this point in your life, you said you were 40, you guys had just bought a house, you have children. I mean, the paycheck just stops, like no more money coming in. Were you part of a dual income household at this point?
So dual income household, but I was the primary. Um, we thought we did everything right. Our hospital had a disability insurance policy. I had a private policy. Came to find out also that the hospital policy in fine print didn't cover work-related injuries. So I was flatly denied and told that I would have been better off if I fell off my bike. And then I found out that my private policy, while I'm glad I had it, we didn't have to sell our house, wasn't exactly what I should have had. And so that kind of started my frustration and resentment of the industry. And then I applied for workman's comp because I figured, okay, well, my hospital's not paying because it's work related. Well, then surely workman's comp would cover it. And shockingly, I initially got denied that claim because they said while an injury occurred, my frozen shoulder was idiopathic or my fault because I kept working. So I ended up having to sue the state, and that's a whole nother story. So initially, I burned up my vacation time, like all my saved up PTO time. But my husband was working a ton of overtime, and we were just trying to make things work. And it was hellacious.
Okay, the fact that your hospital provided disability insurance did not cover work-related injuries is mind-blowing. Is that common?
So it's not common, but it's not uncommon. I would say 20 years ago, it was pretty uncommon. We see it more and more now, especially since COVID. But the reason is that the money comes from two different pools. So when you're talking about an employer-sponsored disability insurance, if you are sick or injured outside of work, then they're responsible for paying that. Workman's comp is state run. And so it's a way for hospital systems to save cost, because remember, they have to cover all of their employees, not just the physicians.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way for them to shave cost is to say, well, we're not going to pay for work-related stuff because that then falls on the state.
And
So,
for those that aren't listening, like I think it would be surprising for some of you all who've never worked in healthcare to see how physical of a job, like certainly delivering babies is a hugely physical job. You know, most listeners I would imagine have seen or been part of like a delivery. You could imagine how you would get kicked in the shoulder, but I like in residency, I had a huge OR bed that ran across my toe and like it sheared my entire toenail off.
mm-hmm.
I mean, nurses get assaulted all the time by patients.
Docs get
Yeah.
assaulted, you know.
And doctors get assaulted. Yeah. Okay. So let's fast forward. We talked a little bit about you suing the state. That was for the workman's comp
Mm-hmm.
claim, correct?
Yeah.
Walk us through some of that.
So I had to sue the state, and then I was in court 3 times. They had a vocational specialist come out and ask me a million questions. I'm essentially like a checklist, but his job was to come up with jobs that I could do. Because remember, workman's comp is a little bit different because it's can you work, but based on your education, skill set, and training. So the third time I was in court, said vocational specialist said that I could be a billing specialist because I had the aptitude to learn codes. And it just broke me. I was reduced to tears, and I basically told my lawyer we needed to settle because I couldn't go through that again. And nothing against secretaries or ancillary staff, we all need them, but that's not what I put myself through med school, residency, and worked as a physician for 10 years to be a billing secretary. So I ended up settling with the state for pennies on the dollar, but I just needed to be done with it. I
Mm-hmm.
needed my mental health improved, and that was not helping it. So I did end up settling with the state, which gave us a little bit of a runway. And then I did have my private policy that did end up coming through, and I was approved. But like it just wasn't exactly what I should have had. And kind of it was very frustrating to
I
feel like I made mistakes out of sheer ignorance.
I can't imagine. It's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't
Right.
when you talk about the nuance here. Um, did you ever consider like a wrongful termination suit against your employer?
So I spoke with an employment lawyer, but as I mentioned, it did say in my contract I had to be able to do 100% of my job duties, and I couldn't. So it
Mm-hmm.
was a fair termination. It just kind of sucked.
For those that haven't yet signed employment contracts, maybe residents or medical students, did you have an attorney look over your contract before you signed it? Or
I didn't.
what advice would you give younger physicians before they sign their first big girl, big boy contract?
I truly do believe it's worth the couple $100 to have a contract employment lawyer look at your contract so that you understand when can they fire you, when can't they fire you, when can you give notice, right? And why. I just think knowledge is really important. And most of us, it's the first contract they've ever read. And most of us, and I'm painting with a wide brush, but we look at the compensation number and the rest is legalese, right? Don't get enamored by the compensation. There's so much in a contract that you should understand. So that
Also, the big shiny number is appealing because we've got a big old pile of debt
that,
sitting beside us, and so it's like, we got to start paying down the interest at least of
yeah.
the like $200,000-300,000 worth of debt that we've all accrued
Oh,
during medical school.
I did not pay off my student loans until 2020, and my last practice was August of 2013.
Oh my gosh, Stephanie.
Yeah. So I can talk to anyone about student debt, but
Can
right, I mean,
you
my debt didn't go away.
No, no, it doesn't. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is a frozen shoulder and what limitations do you have today?
So a frozen shoulder, and again, I'm not an orthopedist, and personally tried to kind of put my head in the sand a little bit about it so I could be a patient. But basically, for a multitude of reasons, you end up building adhesions in your shoulder. And they don't know exactly why. We also see perimenopausal and menopausal women kind of will iatrogenically get a frozen shoulder. Mine was from trauma. It turns out I also have EDS. And so that's probably why I didn't heal as well and why it was like a bomb went off in my shoulder. But basically, your shoulder, I mean, as the word adhesive capsulitis is the medical term, but frozen
Hmm.
shoulder really lets you know what it is. It literally gets locked. And so I couldn't flex or extend my arm fully. Like right now, on a good day, I can get to about 110 degrees in front of me. My lateral motion, less than 90 degrees, like all my bras snap in the front because I don't have the manual dexterity to get to the back. Um, I also have nerve damage from this, maybe from the surgery, maybe pre-dating or post-dating with compensation. So there are times where my fingers go numb, or I'll have nerve pain throughout my arm, which I will tell you, I will put neuropathic pain above just about any other type of pain. It is, I don't even know how to describe it. It is, and it's really hard to touch. Um, Gabapentin didn't work for me. I know it works for a
Yeah.
lot of people, but it just made me groggy and in pain.
Yeah, a lot of the pain medications that work on neuropathic pain have pretty significant side effects. Let's go back. You mentioned you have EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mhm.
Did you know that you had that before your shoulder injury?
I've had an idea since high school, but quite honestly, I never wanted to get tested because I never wanted it in my medical record.
Okay.
Um, But I was a ballerina, I was super bendy, I'm you know, I could do those things with your arms and thumbs that, not everybody can do. So it wasn't a shock when I finally met with a rheumatologist and gave her my life story, and she was like, "You know you have this, right?" And I was like, "If you say so." I'm like but it makes a lot of my history make sense.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah.
Okay, so it's interesting that you brought up that you were a ballerina. I was a gymnast, and I felt like when I stopped gymnastics when I was 20, I had this like real loss of identity because it was like my everything, my world. Then I threw myself into pre-med and like getting into medical school. Talk about kind of the identity loss that you had when you had to stop calling yourself Dr. Pearson. You stopped seeing patients, you stopped going into work.
So I ne it's funny, I never really called myself Dr. Pearson, and, like, I didn't take my husband's last name, so I answer to Mrs. Myers or Dr. Pearson, but I was like, "Holy snarkies, if I'm not Dr. Pearson, who am I?" Right? Like, you get married, you have kids, you kinda lose yourself a lot just being a woman in medicine, and then on top of that, it was like, how do I introduce myself now? Because a lot of people, you introduce someone, I would say Stephanie Pearson, and they'd be like, "Oh, you didn't change your name?" And then I'd have to, well, I'm a doc, it's on all my stuff. Um, and I remember the first time I overheard somebody asking my son what his mom did, and he said she used to be a doctor. And that was a bad. point. I mean, I was just reduced to tears. And I was like, "Oh my God, who am I if I'm not Dr. Pearson? Like, that's who I am. And I'm a surgeon, and now I'm not a surgeon." And, it took a lot of therapy and medication to get me out of my own way. I've talked very openly about the dog park. Clearly, the boys and I aren't enough to get you out of bed. So you have a choice. You can be surrounded by filth, or you can get up and start taking care of something that can't take care of itself. And she is why I'm here. Um, we went to the dog park every morning. 90% of the people didn't even know my name. I was just Kim's mom. And I didn't have to talk about medicine. I didn't have to talk about that entire part of my life. I just got to be Kim's mom. And eventually I was Stephanie, Kim's mom. And so I was able to kind of realize again that I had other things to speak about and I had more to offer. And okay, this really sucks, but I'm only 40, so let's figure something else out because I'm not the type of person to just sit on my couch and watch TV.
It says a ton about your marriage that your husband came home with the puppy and was like, "Stephanie, we've got to change here." Is that the kind of person that he is? Like, we lean so much on our spouse for different aspects of our life, and the fact that he was the one that brought the catalyst for you to get up off the couch and go outside, and I mean, you probably think about that a lot today.
Oh, I think about it all the time. I mean, we have both saved each other's lives in different times and seasons, and I hated him when he brought the dog home. I thought it was the meanest thing in the world, but it turns out that that is truly, I mean, I have no problem. It's been 12 years, I could still cry about it. I mean, that's what saved my life. I had written letters, I had a plan. I thought that they were better off with me dead than alive and disabled. And I will also say, I don't consider myself a disabled human. Like, I would never get a handicap or sorry, I know that's not the right word anymore. Um, like the car tag. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think of myself disabled that way, but I'm very much a disabled surgeon. I'm right hand dominant, but I was a left-handed surgeon because I taught residents. So you learn how to get really good with your non-dominant hand, and that's my affected arm. And so, eh,
And surgery is very much a two-handed sport. I mean, even if you were primarily a right-handed surgeon, you really cannot operate with one
one
hand.
hand.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was a ballsy move, but it worked. So I credit them a lot. And he knows I feel that. I tell him all the time. I mean, he's always been my biggest cheerleader, and I'm his. That's why we're
There's
married
the
20 years later.
Oh, I love it. I love it. The cheesy quote of like, be the change you want to see in the world. Um, you then co-founded a disability insurance company focusing on providing great coverage to physicians. You had two crappy policies. You had this horrible injury. You were left in the mud and dirt and surgeon graveyard. Like, talk about how you used all the crap you went through to create a company that serves physicians in a very positive way.
So once I realized where mine had fallen short, I just wanted to learn everything I could about it because I was like, I can't believe I let myself get taken advantage of. And I really just set out to learn about it. And it was a place for me to focus my energy. I had been doing a couple of other things to try to figure out like what was I going to do next. And then just a couple of my friends and their partners who were physicians would just ask, like, "Can we ask exactly what happened, and what would you do differently?" And And so I just started talking about it with my friends, and then some of them were like, "Hey, would you talk to my residents about your story?" And I
Mhm.
was doing that, and I felt good about that aspect of teaching, but I was sending them elsewhere to get their policies. And one day, you'll see a thread here, my husband said, maybe this is the next step. Why don't you go get licensed? And I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I'm like, I'm a
This is
physician.
another dog.
Yeah, I was like, I'm a physician. I'm not a salesperson. I don't know anything about insurance. He's like, you know more about disability insurance now than just about anyone I've met. So let's do this. So I locked myself in a room for 6 weeks and studied my butt off and took the test and then cried in my car uh, because I didn't get an A. And my husband laughed at me. Uh, he was like, "Has anyone ever asked you your board scores?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "You really think anyone's going to ask what you got on your insurance test?" And I was like, "But I didn't get an A." And he's like, "Oh my God, you kill me." And then we started the company at our kitchen table, and he figured out all the back end stuff. So he set up the LLC and he set up the bank account, and he just let me do what I do, which is teach. And that was the big thing. He said, "You're not a salesperson. That's why I think this is going to work. You are truly just educating people, and you're trying to tell them, don't make the mistake I made." And I'm able to advocate in a way that your traditional insurance person can't because I understand the medicine.
Mhm.
And, I can help set realistic expectations with people. And I can fight when I think it's a fair fight with underwriters. And so I really was looking, as trite as it sounds, I wanted to change the insurance industry. I wanted physicians talked to the way that I believe that we should be spoken to, and really like kind of make it the closest to informed consent that I can outside of medicine. It doesn't need to be as confusing as I think a lot of people want it to be. It's just not a language that we're taught. So I want to be the person to do that.
So how far from injury date to LLC formation? How long of
For
a time period was
about
that?
3 years. It took me a good 3 years to get out of my own way.
Mhm.
And then I did it myself for a few months. And then my current business partner, Scott Ravitz, and I formed PearsonRavitz, and we turned 8.5 this summer. Or 8 this summer. We're 8.5 now.
What was the hardest part initially about starting PearsonRavitz?
So we're essentially two families, two husband and wife pairs. And it was realizing that we were putting up our personal capital and like this had to work. Like
Yeah.
Ryan and I, my husband Ryan, we didn't really have plan C. And so there was just a certain amount of knowing that, like, okay, like we're all in, and if this doesn't work, we might be in trouble.
Mhm.
Um, but other than that, like I actually really enjoy speaking to physicians about this stuff. As dorky as it sounds, it makes me happy to know that people are getting good quality care.
Congrats on growing the
Thank
business
you.
over the last 8 years. I do find that, like, with my business here, I'm a solo surgeon, and whenever I go to make content on, like, social media, I do try to provide value and not sell to people.
Mhm.
It's like, I don't care which surgeon you pick for your facelift, but if I'm able to gain like that trust and
Right.
be like a an accessible personality
Right.
online, I think that even if they go somewhere else, they will ask good questions of their surgeons beforehand when they're getting that informed consent.
Right.
Um, and it sounds like you kinda operate out of that same wheelhouse where
Yeah.
you say, like, "I'm here to educate. I want surgeons and physicians in general to have a good understanding of disability insurance and how it works, what the policy details include, how the coverage
Exactly.
works if we do have to use it.
Right.
What are some tidbits of advice you would give to early career physicians when it comes to thinking about getting a disability insurance policy?
So absolutely do it while you're in training. There are discounts that are available while you're a resident and a fellow that aren't necessarily available if you wait, which was one of the mistakes I made. I didn't get it till I was an attending because I didn't know better. So that's number one. Number two, you want to make sure that it is truly specialty specific. And I say specialty specific instead of own occupation because different companies can use different phrases. I think one of the biggest issues is that there's no standardization of language in insurance like there is in medicine. So I say specialty specific. You want to make sure that you're covered for what it is you do day in and day out, and if you can't do that, you wanna be able to do something else. And so that
Not
is
not being a billing specialist.
not being a billing specialist, secretary. Yeah. So that's probably the second most important thing. And then you wanna know what the other building blocks or riders are. So what's important to one person may not be important to another person, and each company has its own little nuance that makes it unique. It's not a very big playground, and so you wanna make sure that whomever you're speaking with is showing you more than one option, really can answer your questions, has helped people on claim, right? You don't want somebody who's never helped anybody, right, when it comes down to it. And that was a big thing for me. The guy who sold me my policy was not super helpful when I reached out that I was going out on claim.
Mhm.
And so that service side was really, really important to me.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that you never wanna use, and then if you do
No,
have to use it, you wanna make sure that those folks are in your court ready to fight.
exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about how old your kids were when the injury happened. You mentioned that like heartbreaking moment where you said your son was like, "My mom used to be a doctor." I would imagine as a mom of two boys, this has really impacted the way you talk to your children about their careers. Never do you want to plan to like get injured and have to completely shift your professional life. But talk to us a little bit about how you've chatted with your children about all of this and maybe how you guys sit around the dinner table and talk about their future careers because of what they've seen you go through.
There's a lot there. So they were 4 and 6 when it happened. They're now 17 and 19. My oldest remembers my life as an obstetrician. My 17-year-old has very, very vague memories, but the older one will still get me every now and again where I'll say something like, I'd kill a puppy to be back in the OR, which I wouldn't really kill a puppy, I love animals, but, he'll look at me without even thinking about it, and he's like, "Would you give up the time you had with us?" Or, "What's your silver li" like, he knows to say, "What's your silver lining?" And I will say, without a doubt, and I almost hate saying this because I used to have mommy guilt when I was practicing, but I really do think that my relationship with both of my boys is a certain way now that it could have never been if I was still practicing the way that I was practicing. I've literally had dinner with my children almost every night, short of a few nights. Like, my kids, neither of them are athletes, they're both cerebral, and so it wasn't like we were running around at activities at night. We've actually had family dinner, and that means more to me than anything. As far as, you know, at that time, the problems were, like, I couldn't lift up my 4-year-old. He would have to go on the stairs and jump on my
Mhm.
right hip, and that was how I could carry him. And it were things like playing catch became very difficult. I could use my right arm, but I couldn't use my left arm, and they would throw things haphazardly. And like without thinking about it, I'd go to move my arm and it would really hurt, right?
Hmm.
So like some of our activities had to change. As far as like their future jobs, we kind of never wanted them to go into medicine, even when we were both practicing. The early 2000s was not a great time in medicine. And so that was really never a thing. And then when COVID happened, we kind of doubled down. My husband was a flight nurse, and he left medicine in 2018 to be our CFO full time. But they saw, the craziness of his schedule, and my older one remembered mine. And so medicine was never an issue. As far as protection, we've been very open with them about all things financial literacy related since they were little, because neither of us were really taught a whole lot. And we really wanted them to understand money and the value of a dollar and work and all of that. So we've talked about protection. We've talked about making sure that, when they get their first jobs, that they have someone look at their contracts, regardless of what it is they decide to do. And,
Hmm.
and I start worrying because my oldest son has a bleeding disorder. And right now, no one would cover him for disability insurance. So, like, I've even started thinking about the things that I'm like, oh, what are we gonna, how do we have to adjust how he saves or how he invests, and what can we do to help? Because I know unless things drastically change in the next 5 years, I'm probably not going to be able to get him coverage, which is
Hmm.
also annoying when you're like, this is what I do day in and day out now, and I'm not going to be able to help him.
Yeah. So for those listening, there are some, how would you explain it, Stephanie? There are some diagnoses or
Diagnoses.
conditions that automatically exclude you. I know one of my co-residents, she had a chronic disease that automatically excluded her. What are some of the common, I guess, more common medical conditions that would
Being knocked
automatically
out.
exclude? Yeah.
So type 1 diabetes, the traditional carriers won't cover. There is something called a non-traditional carrier. So there are three companies that will cover the hard to insure or the most uninsurables. Um, but that also is another talk. But um, certain cancer histories, and I'm talking like even if you had like AML as a 2-year-old, they
Mm.
may not cover you as a seemingly healthy 30-year-old resident. So certain cancers, um, major depressive disorder has a lot of limitations. It doesn't make you uninsurable, but there are some issues surrounding that. Um, Sjogren's, there are certain autoimmune diseases that the traditional carriers don't want to cover. MS is another one. Um, I mean, there's quite a handful. And again, especially if you're in training, you want to see, because there's also something called a guaranteed standard issue or GSI policy, which is a policy that requires no medical underwriting. And so the carriers have to cover you. There are other limitations, but GSIs are only available at some teaching hospitals. And if there is, you want to apply for that if you have any issues. If you apply to a traditional carrier first and you get declined, then you can't apply for the GSI. You end up knocking yourself out. So it's really, really important, especially if you're somebody that I have underlying diagnoses, to see if they have a GSI at their institution.
For those listening that are interested in learning more about disability insurance, where can folks find information about you and PearsonRavitz?
So our website is PearsonRavitz.com. Um, if you Google my name, a whole bunch of stuff comes up. We are on, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I think I'm like one of the easiest to find folks these days. So I'll make sure that you have all of those tags or whatever you call them. I'm old.
Stop it. No, you're not. Okay. Well, Stephanie, I really want to thank you for sharing your story. I mean, you're really an incredible inspiration. You've laid
Thank
your
you.
whole last, 15 years out for those to learn from. Any last little nuggets you want to leave listeners with today?
Make sure you get covered before you're finished training, and there is a lot to life outside of medicine, and really work on that while you're in training so that you don't lose it.
I love that. I love that. Today's episode is brought to you by the Hippocratic Collective. Check out all our shows and content at hippocratic-collective.com.